University of Cambridge. And in following their speeches and discussions, we hope that you will gain a better and holistic understanding of the nexus that exists between blockchain and society. Particularly, we would like you to, we hope that we can provide you with a better understanding of how this technology works for those that are not familiar still with it, and also help you formulate, more importantly, your own opinion about it and be able to express it. And even more, to encourage you and inspire you to keep on exploring this technology and its applications, whether this be in your work, in your research, or even in personal life. So finally, in putting together this event, we are very lucky that we had the support of our course mates, of the Treasury School, of our sponsor, Blockchain Terminal, and that you are well interested here and that you are here. So finally, we hope that you enjoy this event, and we will leave you with our head of the program, Michael Polly, so that he can kick off the event officially, and we can start enjoying this conference.
Well, hello everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to the Cambridge Judge Business School. I have the great pleasure to be the director of the MPhil in Technology Policy, whose students have organised this conference today. The MPhil is one of our 2 professional practice MPhils at the Judge, and it aims to take the very best students, some of whom are on display today, globally, from science and engineering, and to help them to be prepared to work at the interface between business and government. A year ago, as has already been mentioned, I welcomed participants to a wonderful conference on artificial intelligence and its relationship to sustainability. And it's a great delight to welcome you all here to talk about a new technology and its relationship to a wider social objective, this time the objective of improving governance. Blockchain is a new technology with wide-ranging implications. I've already had a couple of conversations on the way in about how disrupting blockchain is going to be. Now, you'll forgive me as a dismal economist. Of course, I've heard loads of pitches for disruption in technology. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about how this particular technology is going to disrupt everything. Of course, blockchain is a fascinating technology. It threatens to upset bookkeeping and accounting, to upset exchange and currency. But of course, those things are pretty fundamental to the operation of the economy. So we need to think carefully about the regulatory and political implications of those sorts of technologies. But to do that, we really need to understand how they work. And so this conference is a wonderful opportunity to understand that interface between how technologies actually work and what their societal implications are. So what are the business, political, and moral challenges posed by blockchain? What will blockchain's impact be on the markets that it's applied to? Are there good parallels to blockchain from other markets and indeed other countries' experiences? Will the issues facing blockchain be different in different countries, particularly in emerging markets compared to advanced ones? What's the social cost-benefit analysis of blockchain technology? And how do we measure its impact? And what issues surrounding blockchain need to be addressed at the national level, and what issues need to be addressed at supranational level? For the moment, that might be the EU when it comes to the UK. but perhaps it'll also be at some higher world level. These are all the sorts of questions that we answer in the core of our MPhil in technology policy, and doubtless our distinguished lineup of speakers will attempt to answer these questions and many others surrounding blockchain today. So it just remains for me to thank the organisers today who so brilliantly put together today's event, and I hope you will get opportunities to meet them through the course of the day. So thank you very much to Stephanie, to Sven, to Shuban, to Timothy, to Archie, Joshua, Glenda, and Moritz. Thank you very much on all our behalf. We're very grateful to the conference that we put together today. And finally, it just remains for me to thank every one of you for supporting the event and for coming today for what I'm sure will be a most excellent conference. Thank you.
So if you've read the brochure or our schedule online, you'll know that our first speaker today was going to be Sally originally. You can already hear from that advert. And unfortunately, Sally, due to events completely out of control, won't be able to make it today. She's extremely sorry and extends a sincere apology to all of you. And she's so sorry, in fact, that she wishes to make up for it. And so in the coming months, Sally will be hosting an interactive blockchain workshop here in Cambridge. We don't have the details yet because this was all very short notice, but we have all your email addresses from our ticketing platform. And so we'll keep you in the loop as this event transpires to give you all the chance to attend it. It will probably happen sometime in May after the Easter break. Again, we're really sorry about this. We've organized a backup speaker. And so we're just setting up with them right now, and they'll probably arrive within the next couple minutes, and then we'll just get the first keynote started, and I'll introduce them. Again, sorry for the confusion about that.
Yes.
So, since our speakers arrived, so we'll take a seat again. That'd be great. So I'll just introduce our speaker while he sets up everything and he's about to come in. So our first speaker will be Dr. Gary Kalman, who will also be on the first panel. As a researcher, Dr. Gary Kalman is regularly invited to share his perspective with government agencies, including the CIA, US Army, Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and the media. Gary authored the 2017 Global Blockchain Benchmarking Study while at Cambridge, and he also created CoinDesk's State of Bitcoin and State of Blockchain reports from 2013 to 2016. Most recently, Gary co-founded a new decentralized market intelligence network called Mosaic.io. So we're very excited to have him here. And I just saw him outside, so hopefully he'll come in any minute now.
Great. Hello. So I thought I was just going to be on a panel today. So this was thrown together at the very last moment. And the focus of this presentation is on blockchain technology, the non-cryptocurrency applications of it. And that's actually something I haven't been speaking about as much lately, for reasons you're probably well aware. Cryptocurrencies and related areas are more in focus right now than I think what the subject of this conference is about. So I had to go back a bit to pull out these slides, but we do have a piece of research that we published in September, the Global Blockchain Benchmarking Study, that summarized the kind of empirical data on what's happening in the enterprise, what's happening in government, how companies, public sector institutions are approaching subjects like blockchain governance. And so the data and information I'm going to be sharing with you today is primarily drawn from that report. Just keep in mind that, again, there's been no chance to really rehearse this, and I literally was finishing the slides as I was walking in the door here with my computer open. So yeah, first, I guess, why don't I introduce myself as well. My name is Garrett Heilman. I'm here in Cambridge. I hold positions at the University of Cambridge as well as the London School of Economics. And I've been interested in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology for quite some time now. I first became aware of Bitcoin in 2011, and I started looking at it primarily, from a currency perspective, like so many of us. But it quickly became apparent to me that to try to think about this like an economist was to not do the technology justice. And so I drew upon my background working in technology. Prior to coming to the UK, I lived in the Bay Area for 10 years working in fintech, finance. And I think that was one of the things that helped me, understand the significance of Bitcoin and its underlying technology earlier than I think a lot of academically trained economists. This wasn't just a currency, this was very much a technology platform that could be used for many, many different things. Recently, I'll just give a quick advertisement here. Recently announced a new project called Mosaic, which I co-founded, which is really trying to solve what we think is the #1 problem in blockchain, which is the lack of high-quality information, data, and research on the subject. There's so much misinformation in the blockchain space. I constantly hear from public sector organizations, from companies saying, Garrett, there's all sorts of claims being made about this blockchain can do this, and this DLC platform can do that. We really need more independent, rigorous research on capabilities and so on. So Mosaic is very much a platform for trying to create better information, more reliable information around blockchain for us to make decisions on. So look forward to you learning more about that in the weeks and months to come. Okay, so first, quick introduction. How many people here are like blockchain ninjas, know the technology inside and out? Few hands I expect to go up here. But most people here are relatively still new to the subject. It's a very challenging subject to wrap your head around, so I'm going to just briefly present a few kind of introductory slides for those of you who are newer to blockchain and distributed ledgers on how it works. So most of us came to, as I mentioned, know about blockchain through Bitcoin. This is the image that often accompanies any story around Bitcoin, especially, but even some blockchain stories leads to a lot of confusion, right? Bitcoin is not a physical object; it's purely electronic, as is blockchain. And yet, this physical image is used to actually introduce the subject to many people. The better image to keep in your mind's eye as you're thinking about what a blockchain is, or represents, or what a cryptocurrency is something more like this: a network of computers communicating with each other across the internet, right? Staying in sync, achieving consensus about the state of who owns what, basically, right? Cryptocurrencies and most blockchains, I think, are somewhat different than, say, our traditional financial system in an important way, which is that the assets, the stocks, the bonds, the currencies, are not integrated completely into the networks and ledgers on which they are traded and transferred in the same way that a blockchain-based system is. Okay, so you can think about like your assets, your stocks, your bonds, your dollars as kind of the rail cars, traveling on a set of rails. That's the network of the ledger, right? But with a traditional financial system, you can pick up this car and you can move it to a completely different set of rails. You know, I can go back and I can take my US dollars, I can trade them in New York, I can trade them in Hong Kong, right? Cryptocurrencies and blockchains are integrated systems, right? In the case of Bitcoin, you cannot really transfer Bitcoin off its blockchain, right? It's locked. That car is locked to the rails. And this basically enables a greater degree and ease of programmability that can make blockchains, I think, quite powerful. In terms of how blockchains function, very simplified view here, but imagine, you know, I want to initiate a transaction and send, say, some Bitcoin to someone. Before that transaction is completed, it has to be verified. It has to pass through a gate, okay? And the gate is controlled by the miners, right? The computers right here that are running the network, okay? And they're checking to make sure that I'm not trying to double spend that transaction, all right? That I actually have Bitcoin, in the case of Bitcoin that I'm trying to send. And after that verification process has been completed, that transaction, along with others that have occurred recently, are bundled together into what is called a block. All right, they're batched together, roughly a few thousand transactions in the case of Bitcoin, and that block is appended to the end of the blockchain, of the ledger that keeps track of who owns what. Right, roughly up to about 500,000 blocks in Bitcoin's case now. That ledger's complete history goes all the way back to the beginning of Bitcoin on the 3rd of January 2009 when Satoshi Nakamoto set the whole project in motion. All right, so that's basically how blockchain works. Okay, most people today, when they look at blockchains in Bitcoin, think the technology actually really isn't all that, you know, well, it's important, but it's not the key ingredient. It's actually the game theory that makes the whole system kind of hang together, all right? And here we have this kind of concept of co-opetition in the case of Bitcoin, where miners, the people maintaining the network, are simultaneously cooperating with each other to achieve consensus, to agree on the state of the ledger, but they're competing with each other at the same time, right? And that co-opetition, that game theory, that economic component, is really considered to be really the key to the success of blockchains, at least in the case of Bitcoin. All right. How can we think about blockchains more broadly? Well, they share properties with other distributed databases and replicated databases. All right. So this framework here, you can kind of see how blockchains kind of sit within this broader category of distributed databases, which have been around for a long time. And many things, many companies, I think in the past 12 months, who kind of, been dealing with the hype surrounding blockchain, have been revisiting, this kind of framework to think about: do we really need a blockchain, or will a traditional replicated database, where there's redundancy created by storing data on multiple machines, and more flexibility in terms of, the degree of centralization, the ability to censor or unwind transactions? Will a more traditional database actually be the right solution for what we're trying to do versus, say, a blockchain? Okay. 5 key components of a blockchain: cryptography, there's a peer-to-peer network, some kind of consensus mechanism, there's a ledger, and there's validity rules. All this, by the way, most of these slides are in the Global Blockchain Benchmarking Study, which you can download from the Cambridge Judge Business School website, from my website. It's on SSRN as well. Lots of myths and misconceptions around blockchain. Somehow that, there's a myth that blockchains are trustless. There's always some degree of trust required in a blockchain. Okay? As soon as you hear someone say that a blockchain is trustless, you should be immediately skeptical. This person is clearly a marketing professional. If nothing else, you're trusting in the underlying cryptography that powers blockchains. The cryptography, for example, in Bitcoin has never been mathematically proven to be, basically hack-proof. It just hasn't been, right? You're trusting that, there aren't any fatal cryptographic flaws when you use the Bitcoin blockchain. You're could be. We haven't been able to prove that there aren't. Blockchains are immutable or tamper-proof. Okay, that's not true at all. Right? Take the case of Ethereum and the DAO. Right? That was the case where history was unwound. Blockchains are 100% secure. You know, Bitcoin has an inherent vulnerability, the 51% attack. You don't even need 51% of the network to actually successfully attack Bitcoin. You can pull it off with less than 50%, just not with 100% certainty. So blockchains have inherent vulnerabilities. They're not completely secure. And then blockchains are truth machines. You know, what you see in a blockchain is the truth. Well, that's not true. It's the principle of garbage in, garbage out. If you put a bunch of lies in a blockchain, what you have is a tamper-resistant ledger full of lies. Right? So it's only as good as the information that goes into it. Okay, so use cases. We try to collect data in our study on different use cases. Lots of hype, as I mentioned. So one thing that I found interesting, we're at Cambridge, right? So we're gonna make fun of our friends in the other Cambridge over in Massachusetts. There was this piece that came out last year in Harvard Business Review, published by the MIT digital currency team, describing blockchains will do to banks and law firms what the internet did to media. Wow, pretty significant. But that title was later changed to blockchains will do to the financial system what the internet did to media. And I don't know what was behind that change exactly. I haven't actually asked my friends at MIT about this, but I suspect some of their financial backers in the MIT Media Lab are law firms. Maybe Harvard was playing a mean joke on their cross-river friends. But anyway, lots of hype surrounding what blockchain can do, right, is the main point. Let's abstract away from the technology for a second. What is a blockchain really achieving? To me, it's a new trust and cooperation mechanism, right? It's a digital handshake, if you will. It's a way to actually get away from this traditional means by which we have achieved cooperation and trust that can be easily broken, right? We're substituting in people we trust, in handshakes we trust, in our reputations, in our word, our honor. We're substituting in place of that software code, systems and rules that are inviolable, that in the words of Munib Ali, a co-founder of Blockstack, help us get from a world where today we have mottos like at Google, don't be evil, to a world where we can't be evil. All right, so going from a don't be evil world to a can't be evil world. A don't be evil world is a world where a company like Google has enough discretion and power where they actually have to make a choice and think about whether or not they're going to be evil, right? The vision of Blockstack and other companies is if we move to a blockchain-based world, we take that discretion away, right? The rules of the blockchain simply disallow the kind of fraudulent activity, theft, violation of trust that plague many aspects of our world today, right? That's the big vision. Why use a blockchain? This is really important, right? Everyone's been rushing into the blockchain space, but have they really critically thought about why you would want to try to use a blockchain? Well, you first need a network or a marketplace, stakeholders, customers, partners, right, that you're trying to bring together. And with that group, you're trying to achieve some kind of consensus on a shared set of facts. Who owns what, for example? Right? You need some kind of agreement among that group. You would like to have an audit trail, some kind of system of provenance for understanding the history of whatever it is you're tracking. Resiliency. Resiliency, in terms of the uptime and the reliability of the system, is the #1 thing that central banks in their testing of blockchain technology have taken away from why they consider using a blockchain. The fact that Bitcoin, in 9 years of operation, effectively hasn't had a single nanosecond of downtime. You think about moving away from a cash-based system to a cashless society, the importance of having a 100% uptime payment system is critical. Can you imagine what would happen if we went to a purely digital currency world and the payment system was offline for several days or several weeks. You know, back in the Stone Age, trading liquor and cigarettes, and you got a gun. You have lots of those in the United States, unfortunately. You know, so 100% of time for critical infrastructure, that's a real attraction to blockchain technology for central banks, for energy, for healthcare, and other critical infrastructure providers. And then finally, you're looking for some kind of settlement finality in quote unquote immutability, right? I have an asterisk on that term immutability for the reasons you discussed, but you would like this to be more cash-like in terms of the way it functions, more of a bearer instrument. These are some reasons you would use a blockchain. There are other ones, but these are some of the more important ones. So this is the study I described that we published in September. Now I'm going to just go into some of the data from the study. We were fortunate to have the cooperation of over 200 organizations, 30 central banks, dozens of DLT startups, DLT network providers, providing private non-public data, empirical data to inform the study. So it was the first of its kind global benchmarking study. We're very happy with the turnout. So the landscape as we define it really consists of three key players in the DLT space. You have the infrastructure providers, so these are the organizations and companies that are actually creating core protocols, the base layers. You have application developers building, you know, the application layer that most users will interface with. That's where, you know, kind of the real kind of user-facing functionality exists. Then you have the operators of the networks. These are the parties that actually take charge of operating the actual DLT network, right? So that's kind of how we broke out the study, is looking at these three different categories and comparing them. This is an example of kind of a typical kind of DLT integrated stack, if you will. So Chain, in this case, providing the protocol layer. NASDAQ, with their linked blockchain system, is running the network, all right, using Chain's protocol layer. And then actually Citi is has an application basically built into this, right? So this is kind of one of the ways you can kind of visualize how a blockchain stack looks. We have data on the number of DLT startups. This is a crowded space. There's over 115 DLT startups in 2017. That's a lot of startups. You saw a lot of growth from 2014 to 2015, and then a leveling off in 2016, 2017. Right? We saw pivoting occur from Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin-focused companies into blockchain companies. But as the road got harder in the blockchain DLT space, we also saw fewer startups kind of entering. Right? I think this is a little bit of a measure of some of the issues we're going to talk about now in terms of why haven't we seen more DLT and blockchain adoption in enterprise, government, and elsewhere. We counted at least 2,000 full-time employees working in the DLT space, so this is a very conservative estimate. There are companies like Deloitte and IBM that are employing close to 1,000, if not more than 1,000, by themselves that are not captured in this number. Right? So, you know, maybe 4,000 or 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, roughly, rough estimate. Not a huge, you know, massive industry yet, right? In terms of where employment is concentrating, it's the infrastructure providers, the protocol builders that have the highest median number of employees compared to application developers and operators. 10 compared to 5. So use cases and business models. We asked, you know, what percentage of DLT platforms are tracking different items, and these are the most popular items to put on a DLT: data records, financial assets, physical items. So in the case of CME's partnership with the Royal Mint, CME is a funder here at the Judge Business School. They're backing their digital token with gold at the UK Royal Mint. As I understand, you can actually redeem that digital token for actual physical gold if you so desire. That's a really interesting area of DLT, is the idea of kind of tokenizing physical assets and the challenges associated with that. You know, remember we talked about this garbage in, garbage out issue. How do you make sure that something physical is properly represented on a distributed ledger? Right, big challenge. I'm doing some work with the UK's food standards government agency, and they inform me that you can actually take a culture from a Roquefort cheese or some other cheese. So you can biosample it, creates a unique fingerprint of that particular cheese that can be inputted into a DLT system, and then when that cheese comes across the channel, it can be tested to make sure that Roquefort was the one that was actually scanned and uploaded to the DLT system in France. That's interesting. Interesting work being done around recycling too, in terms of how to verify that when you go to a kind of recycling facility and you put your aluminium, learn how to say that correctly here, onto the measuring device, that it can tell the difference between the aluminium and some other material based on weight and some other things, right? So that's a big challenge, right? How do we make sure that with physical objects that it's not a garbage in, garbage out situation? And digital identity is, of course, another area of particular focus. Not surprisingly, based on all the hype and our data shows that financial services and banking are the most frequently targeted sectors by DLT startups. That's where a lot of the action has been to date. At the same time, we're seeing more kind of cross-functional areas like supply chain, digital identity, regulatory compliance, intellectual property, things that cut across industries also receiving a lot of attention from DLT startups. And again, financial sector institutions are currently the main customers of DLT service providers. Banks leading the way there. One of the things we really wanted to try to understand better was the revenue models for DLT. How are people going to make money, in the DLT space, right? And the answer is not entirely clear. These are just some of the different revenue streams that companies in the DLT space are thinking about. Consulting, premium support packages, commercial application development, some kind of premium version, right? Network participation fees. But a lot of the feedback we received was this is still to be decided. Infrastructure providers are focusing on consulting services. Closed source providers are still often undecided. A lot of uncertainty still around revenue streams, but these are some of the areas that are being explored. In terms of maturity in the DLT space, the infrastructure is the furthest along. That's kind of the main takeaway compared to the application layer and the operator layer. There's a lack of large-scale DLT deployments today for a number of reasons. Number one, over 100 startups, lots of different protocols, new ones still being invented, highly fragmented landscape, meaning companies and organizations are worried about committing to a particular protocol and getting locked in, making the wrong choice, right? Big investments required to think about implementing DLT. So the fragmentation is an issue. What use cases are the best to start out with? I think one really good piece of advice I've heard from people working in the blockchain space, DLT space, is if you're thinking about using DLT, start with a brand new use case, right? Some new product or service that doesn't currently exist, doesn't currently have existing infrastructure, people, processes that you have to integrate the DLT system with. You can start from a blank canvas, much easier than trying to think about all the aspects of how you introduce DLT. DLT has an automation component to it, right? Smart contracts, automation. People inside your organization are going to hear that and think, is my job at risk, right? There can be some political resistance. So if you start on a blank canvas, that might be something that can help make your experimentation with DLT go a little more smoothly. Mostly small scale deployments today, just trying to figure out kind of where traction exists. That's the reasons why we haven't seen anything big yet today. Architecture and governance. So one of the interesting things we've observed is how DLT is being used by organizations, which is that a lot of the record keeping is actually not happening on the DLT system, right? So like a hash or a timestamp, a record of a transaction, if something occurred will be recorded, say, on a DLT system, but the actual transaction details are maintained in a separate bilateral database between the parties transacting. Now, why is that? There's some good reasons, actually. I mean, that sounds on the one hand like people aren't really using DLT, fully, and that's true. But there's real concerns, legitimate concerns, legal, regulatory, competitive concerns around having even cryptographically stored information on a competitor's database, on their servers, right? Is that legal? Do the regulations allow me to put my customer's data on a node at another organization or in some jurisdiction outside of the one I'm operating in? So good reasons, defensible reasons for why DLTs are not being fully utilized in terms of the record keeping, right? So even though the software, DLT software that we have today supports smart contracts, we also found that a lot of operators have not implemented fully functional smart contracts. So I think smart contracts are maybe a little overhyped in terms of where they're at today and their use today. Right? The data shows that not everyone is embracing smart contracts right out of the gates. And again, with cases like the DAO, with the parity bug that led to basically a couple hundred million of ether getting frozen, there's good reasons to be a little cautious around smart contracts, right? The majority of industry actors are integrating smart contracts with the legal system. So we call this the smart legal contract. In other words, there's code, it's software code, right? But there's also a traditional legal contract that is connected to that code. And that's, I think, an interesting approach to kind of solve the problem of where we're at today with kind of the legal system not really being in sync with where the technology is. Yeah, this is a really ugly slide to try to present. I apologize. This is a governance slide. This is about the roles that you can occupy in a DLT system. All right, really important slide actually for today's conference, but I didn't have time to put it in friendlier format. Yeah, just read the report, I guess. Yeah, I think I'm starting to run out of time, so let me kind of move this along a bit here. So let's talk about challenges and interoperability. I think that's kind of a key focus for today. So what our research found is the #1 challenge to wider DLT adoption is the legal risks and the regulatory framework, uncertainty around legal and regulations, right? That trumped concerns about scalability, which 12 to 18 months ago was all we were hearing about. Could DLT platforms scale to run the types of major financial infrastructure and other infrastructure people were envisioning? Less of a concern around scalability. A lot of progress has been made on scalability, but the legal regulatory concerns persist. However, interestingly, when the DLT industry has approached regulators about trying to create more regulatory clarity, regulators have pushed back and said, it's too early. We need to see how you're using this technology before we go off and create a rash of new regulations and rules that may or may not be relevant to how this technology evolves. So, is there a bit of an impasse here between where the industry is at and where the regulators are at? We'll see. But that's one thing to be aware of. Confidentiality was the #2 concern. We talked about this earlier, about the concern around customer data being stored on someone else's server and how secure that is. And then #3, this is a classic problem in IT. Challenges around changing existing business processes, how you integrate DLT in existing systems. #3 reason for why we haven't seen more wide-scale DLT deployment. This gets back to the suggestion: start with blank canvas when you think about how to use DLT. Okay. Other takeaways: unclear cost benefits. Yeah, banks are more concerned about these challenges than startups. And then on the privacy, I'm just going to jump ahead here. DLT, what happens with DLT and blockchain and what's happening with cryptocurrency is still relevant to each other. These aren't like completely separate domains. And this, I think, illustrates this point really well. We asked our sample, which privacy enhancing technologies are you exploring to address your concerns around privacy? The top 2 answers were zero knowledge proofs and ring signatures. Zero knowledge proofs are employed by a public cryptocurrency called Zcash. Ring signatures are used by Monero. In other words, what's happening with these in the wild live cryptocurrencies is very relevant to the privacy questions that companies like JP Morgan, for example, are exploring, and hence the reason why JP Morgan is actually partnered with Zcash to explore how zero-knowledge proofs can be used in their quorum system. Interoperability, we found that Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Hyperledger were the three most popular platforms for creating some type of interoperability between DLT systems. And then, on governance, these industry consortiums and initiatives are very popular. And many, our study participants are actually part of a consortium. However, the ones that weren't yet are not planning on joining one in the near future. So I think we've kind of hit, for at least now, kind of peak consortium. I'm sure there'll be more, but there was a real rise, and I think we've kind of seen a level out there. Okay. I don't know, how much time do we have? I'm probably running over.
Another 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yeah. Just real quick on the public sectors, because we had great data from central banks. 500 staff working. We compared central banks to other public sector institutions. So these are things like cities, government agencies, multilateral organizations. We had data from some multilateral organizations. So interesting kind of to see the different views between the central banks and the other government agencies. One interesting data point, in one central bank, unfortunately we didn't get this data for all central banks, we asked them about their staffing mix, like what % of your people are working on different things around DLT. And this major central bank told us that 67% of their people were working on research and supervision and policy related questions, with 1/3 of the people actually working on the technology. Okay, so that was the mix, staffing mix of a particular central bank. I think the use cases that central banks are exploring are widely known: payments and central bank currency, but a whole lot of other things too: record keeping, taxes, audit trail, so on. I just kind of skip ahead. We found that nearly 60% of central banks had tested some version of the Ethereum code base. That was a surprise. It wasn't the Corda. Corda was still in the process of kind of coming out when we were collecting data, but a lot of interest in Ethereum in that code base among central banks. Did that already? Sorry, I'm just going to skip ahead because we're running out of time. So where's this whole thing going? I think what I like to say is the future for cryptocurrency is really unclear, but I think the future for blockchain technology is quite bright in some way, shape, or form. And that process improvements can actually have very, if not sexy, effects on the overall economy and advancing economic growth and so on. Can be quite powerful. The Economist, I think, has done a nice job actually putting a lot of blockchain, kind of explaining blockchain in language that is quite accessible. So I recommend reading their articles on this here more. But they compare it to double entry bookkeeping accounting or a joint stock company in terms of the process improvement that laid a key cornerstone for the advancement of the economic, of the industrial revolution in those cases. Blockchain can play a similar role. Key question is when. Is Mark Andreessen going to be right that we're really, kind of just on the cusp of massive kind of Cambrian explosion of use, or is my former boss Oliver Boostman, correct that it's going to take 5-10 years more before we see, especially in capital markets, wide-scale deployments because of the whole complexity, right? Some key projects to watch that can help answer these questions. These are some of the major initiatives. I mentioned CME's initiative, the Australian Stock Exchange is a key project, major project, and also what DTCC is doing with credit default swaps. How these major initiatives go over this year, I think could have a big influence on how quickly we see broader DLT rollout. There's a few others too that are interesting. I'm just going to skip this because I don't have time. So where are we going to see the most impact? This is the subject of a paper that's coming out soon. There's a couple of ways we can try to estimate where DLTs can have the greatest impact. One really simplistic and problematic measure, but it's interesting, is just count the number of different DLT use cases and see where they fall by industry sector. And with over 130 distinct DLT use cases that we identified, we saw that banking and finance is the sector that has the most identified use cases, say 30%, followed by government 13%, insurance 12%, healthcare at 8%. One of the problems with this approach is that, because Bitcoin, the first blockchain application, is a financial instrument, it was more obvious, I would argue, to the financial services industry to start thinking about how to apply blockchain, how to think about it, and say healthcare. So healthcare may have been a little late to the game, right? You could also look at the market value of publicly traded cryptocurrencies, and again, segment them by industry. So what is the market value share across the top 100 cryptocurrencies say about the interest in using blockchain technology across different industries? And again, banking and finance comes out on number 1, technology services number 2, media and entertainment is number 3. So that's another way you can kind of try to approach this question. What is the market saying about where blockchain can be having the greatest impact? That's a market-based view. Of course, the big question with all this is what's going to happen with cryptocurrencies, right? With the future of blockchain technology looking bright, what does that mean for things like Bitcoin? Very, very difficult to know the answer to that question. This landscape, and the three-way intersection that cryptocurrencies sit at between economics, politics, and technology is constantly shifting. The technology is, adapting and advancing while policymaker views are evolving both based on the technology's capabilities, along with what's happening in the economy. We've never seen cryptocurrency go through a global financial crisis. It was born during the last one in 2008. What's going to happen if there's another one? Will people rush into cryptocurrency? And will that exacerbate the crisis and lead to something like a 1930s style, in the US, Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually outlawed the ownership of gold temporarily? Will we see something like that happen? We don't know. But obviously what happens with cryptocurrency and public blockchain is going to have an influence on what happens with DLT in the enterprise, DLT in public sector institutions. And just this week, as probably many of you know, we had a major nation state launch a cryptocurrency on public blockchain. Wow. That was not something I think a lot of people saw coming, right? So very fast moving space, very difficult to know where it's going, but it's very exciting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Gary, for a great foundation, I think, for what this day will bring. We have now around 15 minutes for Q&A. Glenda will be giving around the mic if anybody has a question, and then I'm sure Gary will be happy to answer.
No questions from any of the ringers in the audience, too. Just easy ones, right?
Hi. Hi. Thank you for giving us your perspective. Can you hear me now? Yeah? What do you think is the main vector of attack that banks and central banks have on decentralized cryptocurrencies?
Main vector of attack on, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a real...
In the foreseeable future.
Sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways that government and central banks could regulate, create speed bumps, slow down cryptocurrencies, or, effectively crush cryptocurrencies, in my view, and drive them so far underground that they're not used by the millions of people, probably roughly 15 to 30 million today. Roughly, we estimated between 6 about a year ago, but there's been a lot of growth. But probably 15 to 30 million people around the world today using cryptocurrencies. There's, blockchains are decentralized, but people are centralized, right? I mean, there's rumors in China about some of the top 2,000 people not being allowed to leave the country. Don't know how true that is. That's one way you can kind of manage a cryptocurrency issue. You can, of course, go to Apple and Google and say, in our country, any cryptocurrency related application is now illegal. So, now you've got to jailbreak your phone to install your wallet. A lot of people aren't going to do that, right? So you can create friction. You don't even have to go that far though. What the governments have done traditionally is manage the on and off ramps in and out of cryptocurrency, where people can acquire cryptocurrency by easily transferring funds from their bank account to cryptocurrency exchange. All right, that's what China's done by legalizing cryptocurrency exchanges. They haven't made Bitcoin illegal, but they've really gone after the on and off ramps, and that's the primary, I think, kind of vector for control. Yep.
Can I make a follow-up?
Sure.
So in your experience with Bank of England, Federal Reserve, or with the Financial Stability Board, in their mentality, how motivated are they to start manipulating these on and off ramps to put soft power
So
levers?
several years ago, the Bank of England published a paper, laying out the case for why they don't think cryptocurrency poses any kind of systemic risk to the financial system or a threat to the bank's ability to exercise monetary policy. That was based on data from 3-4 years ago, which showed that really only a few hundred people at the time in the UK were using cryptocurrency. Too small to be a concern, too few people using it for payments. Cryptocurrency then, and even I would argue still now, more closely resembles something like Leonardo da Vinci's supposed painting of Christ that went for $500 million. Very, very expensive asset, but not a currency. The Bank of England doesn't care about how much a Da Vinci goes for in an auction. It's irrelevant to their ability to exercise monetary policy and irrelevant to financial stability. But if something starts to be used more as a payment system, as a currency, and less as an asset, less as digital gold, then that starts to raise concerns, and that those concerns are starting to manifest in conversations with central bankers and policymakers. This topic is on the agenda for the G20 meeting next month at France and Germany's suggestion. There are meetings coming up, one actually in early March that I'm participating at in Milan, the Bank of Italy, with the Financial Stability Board. So there is more attention now being paid to, could this become an issue that threatens financial stability and our ability to exercise monetary policy. And if it does, as I suggested, at the end, you could see a scenario like the 1930s where some of these instruments are at least temporarily banned. And by the way, that may not be a bad thing, right? Because we are not ready to transition to a world where we run on cryptocurrency. And if people flooded into something like Bitcoin during a crisis, the kind of problems that could create for society, we don't want, I would argue. I don't think anyone, I think any rational person in the cryptocurrency space would not want that either. If they study history and understand what happens in situations like the 1930s.
Hello, hi, my name is Jaya. You made a distinction between DLTs and cryptocurrencies and the kind of future of the two. But so, like at the moment, a lot of DLTs still use like some kind of token and cryptocurrency internally in the protocol layer for verification and network security. So I was wondering if you have like any kind of overview of like how much of kind of DLTs don't use that, because that's quite a kind of significant part of the technology and protocol level at this point.
Yeah, great question. This is a question around. I love blockchain, just not Bitcoin. I don't want to do DLT without a token. I don't have as much data as I'd like to kind of address that. But what I suspect is that thesis is being rethought seriously. We're going to see a lot more DLT with Bitcoin, quote unquote Bitcoin, in the future. Look, I really hesitate to mention specific cryptocurrencies because I don't want to be seen as pushing a particular view. But let me just ask you a question, okay? So Ripple, for example, has tracked a lot of interest recently. Price has gone up a lot. Part of what's driving that is the partnerships with banks, right? That Ripple is announcing on other platforms, right? If you're JP Morgan and you're looking at Ripple, which retains some 50% of their XRP token, and you're seeing the value of Ripple go up, and you're realizing that the reason that value is going up is because of their announced partnerships with banks, would you maybe want to maybe tap into that yourself, create your own Bain coin? Just food for thought, right? So.
Can I ask another follow-up question? Or maybe it's just a bit more of a comment, but because there's an interesting development too. I think a lot of the kind of crypto space is becoming more and more aware of the fact that actually the kind of token mechanism, because of the kind of volatility on markets, actually contradicts a lot of the kind of more everyday use cases. So the original question was not like a kind of like, Bitcoin forever kind of statement. It was actually kind of like a genuine, interest in how much of the DLT space is moving towards other kind of network security solutions, basically.
Right. Good question. I guess one thing I would just add there is I didn't get a chance to mention this, but the concept of stable coins I think is really interesting. As a chance for me to actually plug the project I'm involved in. I have a stable coin, full disclosure, called ARC, that's just hitting up off the ground. That's a huge issue for cryptocurrency, right? Volatility, you can't have insurance contracts underpinned with something that's going up and down 50%, right? So some of the utility settlement coin, which UBS and other companies are working on with Clearmatics. I think, in the cryptocurrency space, a viable stablecoin could be a game changer, right? I mean, people could actually hold this and feel comfortable about saying, okay, I'm going to use this to pay my rent at the end of the month. But trying to hold your rent money, Bitcoin would be, dangerous, right? It could work out well, it may not work out so well.
I had a follow-on question as the first question, because you'd said that France and Germany had asked to bring up this topic, but there seems to be a bit of a division even within the European Union, because the smaller countries like Luxembourg and Austria and Slovenia have very liberal policies, and then the big countries are the ones, and obviously the Bundesbank is going to be the most threatened. So do you think this can create division within the European Union? Even though they keep talking about having a unified policy, it doesn't look like it's going that way.
Right, and Estonia has expressed an interest in doing something, but the ECB said you can't really do that because you're part of the euro and we have one currency. Berlin is with London, I think the leading blockchain center, a lot of cryptocurrency. Ethereum's got a big presence there and so on. So, Germany and France had like 4 things they put in their letter to the G20 about why this wanted to go on the agenda. Systemic risk, financial instability was one. I think there's a lot of other reasons. There's interest in elevating this topic, international money laundering, crime issues, and so on, cyber, the rising interest in cryptocurrency amongst rogue nations, North Korea. So I'm doing some very early work with a member of the U.S. Army War College faculty on what the implications of North Korea becoming a big cryptocurrency state could mean for cryptocurrency. That brings geopolitical questions into the mix. So it's a complicated issue. It's not just about systemic risk.
Thank you. I was just wondering, you alluded to cryptocurrencies price fluctuations. Can you possibly attribute that to the lack of liquidity in the market? And to counteract that point, do you think if we were to have development tokens, that could add to the liquidity of the market and therefore stabilize prices, therefore don't need a stable point anymore?
If you added what type of token? Sorry.
Like a token, for example, I'm working on a startup that's issuing bonds and equity tokens, and if that's priced in euro, that you can have an interest rate curve, and that you could potentially increase liquidity within the market. So my point is, do you think the lack of liquidity in the market explains price fluctuations?
I absolutely think the lack of relatively lower liquidity in cryptocurrencies versus other asset classes absolutely is part of the volatility. I think how tightly owned many cryptocurrencies are, a lot of big whales, showing big quantities is another aspect. But it's important to remember that, let's put stable coins aside. I think there's some really interesting designs out there. that are untested. We'll see how well they work out, including ours. Put that aside for a second, but keep in mind with things like Bitcoin, there isn't going to be a central bank, right, that's setting the ceiling by selling an unlimited quantity of Bitcoin into the marketplace like the Swiss National Bank did when the franc was rising in value against the euro in 2010, 2011. They said, we will sell an unlimited quantity of francs, set a ceiling on the value. At the same time, the Swiss National Bank can call the New York Fed and say, hey, open the window, I need more dollars to support the franc, and the Fed will just fund an unlimited number of dollars to keep the franc within that bound, right? There's nothing like that for cryptocurrencies. And there probably won't be if they're fully decentralized in the way Bitcoin and others are. So, I think volatility could improve as there's more liquidity added, more futures markets and other hedging approaches and so on, things you're talking about. But, will they ever have what a central bank can do and the coordination among central banks to maintain that exchange rate window is, I think, unclear at best.
Having said that, on the blockchain platform, you could create your own central bank. Do you think central banks could potentially use the Ethereum platform?
Oh yeah, this is why I've started a stablecoin, because I think with decentralized autonomous organizations and a stable cryptocurrency, you start to have something, if this works, that looks like a future alternative to central banking as it's practiced today. I think this is one of the most interesting kind of areas in cryptocurrency to explore, and one that I'm personally very, very fascinated by. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to work though.
Okay. Unfortunately, we've run out of time now. So let's all give it up again for Gary, and thank you very much. We'll have a tea right now, 15 minutes in the lobby. There will be tea and snacks. So we'll see you back in 15 in here for Thank you so much. Right, yeah. I don't feel not at yeah, although yeah, thanks for your question. Yes.
They're the ones in the afternoon, the ones that are like, oh, I really want to see this.
Oh, right. All right. Yeah.
I think it'll be helpful for us to.
That's probably good academics, so I'm not saying. Maybe we need to like, so we did. Yeah, close together though, like space
Have you seen?
to the left here. Yes, maybe push a little bit, please. Okay, yeah? That should be okay?
Yeah, that should be fine. All right, we get some water bottles for everybody.
No, that's too close.
What other?
People are where? I don't think so.
What's that for?
The stream.
Streaming.
Oh, we're still live. Hello.
We haven't looked at
No.
Oh, did you stream from your, that? I thought it was from like the back.
No.
I see you can do it.
I thought you can do that.
just, I feel we are good.